WWE. Um, yeah, I know this guy's probably not gonna be in the video, because of course not. But so was the Cody and them Dominic Mysterio type of blues. But he could still talk. Like, it wasn't deafening like it is with Dominic Mysterio, where they're screaming, booing, and stuff like that. And it's like, nah, you're not saying nothing. But anyways, let's get right into the video. Here we go. The biggest heel in WWE history.
Dominic Mysterio from day one was set for quite the interesting career in WWE. Being the son of arguably the most legendary luchador of all time is something that was certain to have many pros, but in addition to those pros, it came along with many cons for our now ex-con Dom. His story is only just starting as I write these words, but his growth into greatness has been a treat to watch in real time, and I personally anticipate that this is just the beginning. All that said, today in this video, my intention is to recap with you the evolution Dominic has gone through on our screens over the years, and really highlight the stellar talent of this guy who we now love to hate. If you could, it would help me out a ton if you'd leave a like on this video, and if we had something like, let's say, 200 likes, I'll do this same type of video, but on Dom's mommy, Rhea Ripley. Without further ado, let's talk about how Dominic Mysterio has, in my opinion, become the best version of himself thus far. So to take you back to the year 2005, you know, back when we had the dollar menu at McDonald's and the 24/7 Walmarts, aka in the good old days, it was in that year where we were first introduced to Rey Mysterio's son, being placed in the storyline between his father and Eddie Guerrero, with Latino Heat claiming that Dom was his own flesh and blood because Ray couldn't produce. So yeah, it was certainly an interesting story to say the least, but I bring it up because in the WWE ethos, this was our first real-time seeing Dom, who at this point is just a kid vibing on his PSP. Even still though, in that moment, it seemed that Dom was at least semi-interested in the world his father had become a household name in. And while it was awesome that his father was a household name in a number of different ways, it also becomes something that would hinder him way down the line. Being the son or daughter of what is essentially wrestling royalty is something we have seen a couple of times over, especially in more recent years with stars like Cody Rhodes and Charlotte Flair occupying our TV screens. This obviously can be good as a means of getting a foot in the door, but in some cases it can tie a performer into being something they're not, as well as put heavy expectations on them pretty much from the get-go. Somewhat tangentially here, I want to take a moment to show you this short clip from the Cody Rhodes documentary we got last year that relates to this.
That's Cody Rhodes right there. That's Dusty's boy.
This implies a lot about how Cody's backstage relationships were formed, with many folks just seeing him as Dusty's kid, which, while true in the most literal sense, can be seen as a sort of labeling which put a young Cody in a tough spot. How does this connect with Dominic? Well, years on from his on-screen debut as a literal child, he would make his way to WWE after being trained by his father and Jay Lethal, and was set to do battle with Seth Rollins at SummerSlam 2020. Off the bat, there was innately a ton of focus on this match, both from fans as well as from backstage personnel, due to him being Rey's son. In the ring, this match delivered pretty well, all things considered. Mind you, this was aided by the fact that Seth Rollins is one of, if not the best bell-to-bell wrestler of this generation. However, even with the overall solid reviews, it was clear that Dominic was fairly green. And by green, I mean new, unmolded, untempered, and in many ways, untested. Sure, he made through this match and generally impressed people with his performance, but this match was similar to that of a quiz he had the answers to, compared to something that could really challenge him. Not to say that debuting in professional wrestling by itself isn't a hard task, because it simply is. And doing it on the stage and scale he was doing it on was something unimaginably intimidating, I reckon. But this, alongside his earlier years in the WWE, were very handholdy in the sense that his father, or a seasoned veteran, would always be occupying whatever segment a young Dominic would be in, thus helping him grow while not fully throwing him into the deep end. And while it was nice seeing little moments here and there, like him and his father being the first father-son duo to win the tag titles, as well as him coming along to help Rey take on Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, it became woefully apparent that Dominic was in need of a proper test. This character and version of Dominic needed something different, something fresh, something...
What the hell? Damn it, kid, what are you doing?
Hey, how we all doing? Busy.
This injection of life into the character and person of Dominic Mysterio was something sorely needed, because as I mentioned before, the lucha gimmick was limiting him, and putting him in a position where he could realistically only go so far in the business. So, from the very moment we saw Dominic hoof Edge right in the gonads before following it up by hitting his own father with a massive clothesline, it was clear to many folks watching that this right here was the genesis of something truly great. So there it was, the moment we've all been waiting for. But that was all this was, a moment. From here, what needed to take place was a follow-up, and a strong one at that, as to not lose momentum from his seeming heel turn. As such, Dominic alongside Rhea Ripley would provide us a modern take on an old classic, with the pair's new personas serving as a clear parallel to Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero and Chyna. However, rather than Rhea calling Dominic Poppy, we instead of course have
Mommy. Mommy said, Mommy, it burned.
And from that turn on, we would have months and months of Dominic calling out Rey and trying to incite the older Mysterio to fight him, with some frankly amazing online segments being posted of Dominic and Rhea showing up the Mysterios for both Thanksgiving and Christmas, where Rey was insistent on not fighting his son. To say these videos were anything short of gold would be an absolute understatement, but the ending of the last one saw Dominic put in the back of a police car, making the poor guy do some hard time. And by hard time, it was later revealed to only be a few hours in local jail. But if anything, that made the crowds around the world hate him that much more because he acted like he did actual time in prison, with him also gaining the moniker of ex-con Dom following that whole side story. The constant pestering and seeming hatred for his father eventually led to Dom challenging his father to a match at WrestleMania. However, as has been the case since Dom's heel turn, Rey simply refused to fight his own son. His feelings changed, however, when Dominic got into the face of his mother and sister outside the ring, which incited Rey to finally put his hands on his son and accepted Dominic's challenge. From there, we finally got to see the two face off in the WrestleMania match, where 80,000 people were all cheering for a Latino father to whip his son with a belt, which elicited an enormous pop before Rey finally gave his son the first real heel comeuppance after he pinned Dom. This Mania match was of course massive for a number of reasons, but Dom had even brighter things on the horizon as a part of the Judgment Day, as after Rhea captured the SmackDown Women's Champion, which was of course repurposed to be the Women's World Championship, the goal of the group was for all members in the group to capture gold. As such, on the July 17th episode of Raw, Dom and Damian teamed up to take on Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in the main event of the show for the undisputed tag titles. And while they were unsuccessful, it allowed Finn and Damian instead to go after the undisputed tag titles, while Dom instead opted to go after the NXT North American Championship, which at the time was held by Wes Lee for a record 269 days at the time, when Dirty Dom managed to take the title off him in the main event of NXT on July 18th. This was of course Dom's first singles title in the company, and honestly the guy looked good with gold. Then, just 3 days after winning the gold, on the 21st of July, he would defend that title for the first time on SmackDown against Butch, once again in the main event of the show. And if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that he has completed his hat trick of main events for each episode of weekly WWE TV, with him being the first man in history to achieve this feat. As far as his reign with the North American title goes, he would hold on to it for 74 days before dropping it at NXT No Mercy to Trick Williams, but he regained the title just 3 days later on NXT television after interference from the Judgment Day, this time keeping the title in his hands for 67 days before losing it to Dragon Lee. By this point in the past year or so, he went from doing some solid heel work to being arguably the biggest heat magnet in the company. And with Roman now gone from the picture, I'd argue that Dom is pretty much now the top heel in the overall company. And while his match at Mania this year wasn't really all that special because we pretty much saw it already, just this time he was kind of secondary to Santos, even though I'm fairly sure we would have rather seen him and Rey one-on-one again. But hey, at least this match gave Andrade a showcase. No hate on Santos, by the way. I just found his turn and everything since to be largely meh, aside from Angel Umberto coming back to the main roster, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, let's focus back on Dom, who at this point has had 2 matches with a Hall of Famer at WrestleMania. And in addition to that, he was also trusted this year in being a part of the obligatory local celebrity involvement spot, which can largely be seen as a meh spot by most fans. However, we've seen what being involved with the right celebrity can do for certain stars, as his Judgment Day cohort Damian Priest for his work with Bad Bunny, as well as Sami Zayn for his work with Johnny Knoxville a few years ago, goes on to prove. Like, I'm not saying Dom's gonna win Money in the Bank or a world title this year because he was laid out by an ex-NFL player, but it does show that the people in charge are willing to put him in that position to work with non-wrestlers and make them look good. And that's a pretty far away from where he started in 2020, where he was basically set to work with Seth Rollins because he needed the right hand to guide him at that time. In a lot of ways, he is now a hand that can guide people. Dominic has grown exponentially, and frankly, I think he has a solid chance of being a massive deal in the wrestling world for many years to come. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think about Dirty Dominic Mysterio?
Alright, thank y'all.